Miles, GhostHunter here, and before we start, I need you to understand something. This is not a love story. This is not a revenge fantasy. This is a documented, court-verified, evidence-backed account of how one woman was systematically destroyed by the man she built and by the legal system that man controlled. And I need you to sit with the discomfort of what comes next, because half of America watched this unfold in real time and could not agree on a single thing. Half of them said Betty Broderick was a cold-blooded killer. The other half said she was a warning, a flashing red signal about what happens when you push a person past every boundary a human being has. She put him through Harvard. She put him through Cornell Medical School. She put him through law school after that. She raised his 4 children while he studied, while he built his career, while he climbed. And when Daniel T. Broderick III became one of the most successful medical malpractice attorneys in San Diego, California, worth millions, living in a mansion, driving the cars, wearing the suits, hosting the parties. He looked across his office one afternoon at his 21-year-old receptionist, a woman named Linda Kolkina, and he decided that his wife of 16 years was no longer necessary. What followed was not a divorce. It was an annihilation. And it ended at 5:30 in the morning on November 5th, 1989, when Betty Broderick walked through an unlocked door, stood over the bed where Daniel and Linda slept, and fired 5 rounds from a Smith & Wesson revolver. 2 of those rounds found Daniel, 1 found Linda. Both died in that bed, and Betty Broderick picked up the phone, called her daughter and said, quote, "I finally did it," end quote. She was arrested that morning. She was tried twice. The first jury could not reach a verdict. The second convicted her. 32 years to life. She is still in prison as you hear this. She has been denied parole 5 times. And the question that split an entire nation down the middle, the question that still has no answer that satisfies everyone, is this: was Betty Broderick a monster, or did the system manufacture her? I am going to walk you through every single step, from the beginning, and by the end, you will not be able to answer that question either. That is the point. Let us start where it matters. Not with the end, with the man. Daniel T. Broderick III was born in 1944 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, into a Catholic family with deep Irish roots and the kind of quiet ambition that does not announce itself until it has already won. His father was a respectable man. His mother kept the house. Daniel was the golden child. He was handsome, charming, disciplined, and possessed a quality that would define every relationship he ever had: an absolute, unshakable belief that he was the smartest person in any room he entered. He attended the University of Notre Dame. He went on to Cornell Medical School in New York, and it was there, in that particular world of future doctors and future lawyers and future people who run things, that he met a young woman named Elizabeth Ann Bisceglia. She went by Betty. Betty was from Eastchester, New York, Catholic, the 3rd of 6 children in a strict traditional household where the father worked, the mother obeyed, and the daughters were raised to believe that their highest purpose on this earth was to marry well and support their husbands. Betty was beautiful. She was vivacious. She was funny and sharp and full of energy. And when she met Daniel Broderick, she believed with every cell in her body that she had found the man who would give her the life she had been raised to want. They married on April 12, 1969. She was 21. He was 24. And the first thing Betty Broderick did as a married woman was go to work. Because Daniel was not finished studying, not even close. He had completed medical school, but he had decided he did not want to practice medicine. He wanted to practice law. Medical malpractice law specifically, because that is where the real money was, the intersection of 2 expensive professions. So while Daniel enrolled at Harvard Law School, Betty worked. She taught. She cleaned houses on the side. She managed every bill, every errand, every domestic task, because Daniel needed to study. Daniel needed to focus. Daniel needed quiet. And then, The children came. Kim was born in 1970, Lee in 1971. Daniel IV in 1976, Rhett in 1979, 4 children in 10 years. And through all of it, the pregnancies, the sleepless nights, the diapers, the feedings, the school runs, Betty Broderick kept the household running while Daniel studied, graduated, passed the bar, and began his ascent. I need you to hold this picture in your mind because it matters. For 16 years, Betty Broderick was the engine. She was the infrastructure. She was the reason Daniel Broderick had the space and the silence and the freedom to become who he became. She did not build a career of her own. She did not pursue her education. She did not travel or explore or develop independent relationships. She poured every ounce of herself into one investment, Daniel Broderick. And she expected that investment to pay dividends for the rest of her life. Now hold that, because here is where the floor falls out. By 1983, Daniel Broderick was one of the most prominent attorneys in San Diego. His practice was bringing in more than $1 million a year. They had moved into a house in La Jolla, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. They had the cars, they had the boats, they had the country club memberships, they had the parties where everyone knew Dan and everyone smiled at Dan, and everyone wanted something from Dan. Betty, meanwhile, had gained weight after 4 pregnancies. She was exhausted. She was isolated in a social circle that revolved entirely around her husband's professional world, and she was beginning to notice things. Small things at first. Daniel working later than usual. Daniel mentioning a new employee at the office. A young woman. Her name was Linda Kolkina. She was 21 years old. She had been hired as a receptionist and then promoted to Daniel's personal legal assistant, despite having no legal training, no degree, and no experience beyond answering phones at a previous job. Betty asked about Linda. Daniel told her she was being paranoid. Betty persisted. Daniel told her she was being crazy. Betty found a receipt for a man's dress shirt, purchased in Linda's handwriting, charged to their joint account. Daniel told her it was a gift for a colleague. Betty found another receipt, this time for jewelry. Daniel told her she was irrational, unstable, that she needed help. This pattern has a name in the modern psychological vocabulary. It is called gaslighting. In 1983, there was no widely used term for it. There was only Betty Broderick sitting in a house she had paid for with 16 years of her life, staring at receipts that told one story, while her husband told another, and being made to feel that the problem was her mind. In February of 1985, Betty Broderick discovered that her suspicion was not paranoia. Daniel was having an affair with Linda Kolkina. It had been going on for months, possibly longer, and when demolition, and the man doing the demolishing happened to be one of the best lawyers in the state of California. Daniel Broderick did not just want to leave his wife, he wanted to destroy her, and he had every tool to do it. First, the children. In 1985, Daniel obtained temporary custody of all 4 children. He argued that Betty was emotionally unstable, and he had evidence to support this, because Betty, by this point, was behaving erratically. She had taken the children to his new home and left them on the doorstep. She had left screaming messages on his answering machine. She had thrown his belongings onto the lawn. Every one of these actions was documented. Every one of them was used against her. But here is what Miles, Ghost Hunter, needs you to understand. Betty Broderick was behaving like a person who had been lied to, cheated on, abandoned, and was watching her children being taken away by the man who had done all of those things. Her behavior was not the cause of the crisis. It was the result of the crisis. But the legal system does not care about causes. It cares about evidence. And Daniel Broderick was the one generating the evidence. Second, the money. Daniel controlled the finances. He always had. Betty had never worked during the marriage. She had not needed to, because Daniel's income was enormous. But when the divorce proceedings began, Daniel used his legal expertise to reduce her temporary support payments again and again. At one point, Betty Broderick, the woman who had supported Daniel through 3 graduate programs and raised his 4 children, was receiving $1,500 a month. Daniel's income that year exceeded $1 million. Third, the courts. Daniel Broderick was a prominent member of the San Diego legal community. He socialized with judges. He played golf with opposing counsel. He had lunch with the men who would decide his case. Betty's attorneys told her repeatedly that the system was weighted against her. She changed lawyers multiple times. Each new lawyer told her the same thing. Daniel Broderick knew everyone, and everyone owed Daniel Broderick a favor. This was not paranoia. This was documented. Court records show that at least one judge in the case had a social relationship with Daniel. Betty's requests for recusal were denied. I want you to imagine this for a moment. You are a 40-year-old woman. You have given your entire adult life to one man. You have no career. You have no income. You have no independent identity. The man you built has replaced you with someone half your age. He has taken your children. He has cut your money. He has turned the court system into his personal weapon. And every time you scream, every time you cry, every time you act out in pain and rage and desperation, it is logged, filed, and used to prove that you are the unstable one. You are the dangerous one. You are the one who needs to be controlled. Betty Broderick did not handle this well, and I am not going to pretend she did. She left profane, threatening messages on Daniel's answering machine. Dozens of them. Hundreds eventually. She called him names. She threatened him. She threatened Linda. She used language that would make a sailor wince. Daniel recorded every single one of those messages. He saved them. He played them for his lawyers, for the judge, for anyone who would listen. In 1987, Betty drove her car through the front door of Daniel's house. She did not hit anyone. The house was empty. But the act was documented, photographed, and added to the growing file. Daniel obtained a restraining order. Betty violated it, multiple times. She showed up at events where Daniel and Linda were present. She made scenes. She screamed. She threw things. Each violation was documented. Each one pushed her closer to the edge of the legal cliff. Now here is the development that made everything worse. On April 22, 1989, Daniel Broderick married Linda Kolkina. They had a ceremony. They had a reception. They moved into a house on Cypress Avenue in Hillcrest, San Diego. And they did not invite the 4 Broderick children. Betty learned about the wedding after the fact, from her own children, who had also not been invited. Let me stay on this point because it matters. Daniel Broderick married the woman he had left Betty for, in a ceremony that excluded his own children. The children that Betty had raised, the children she had been fighting for years to see. The children the court had placed in Daniel's custody because Betty was deemed unstable. Those children were not at their father's wedding. If you want to understand what happened 6 months later, you have to understand this moment. This is where the last thread snapped. Between April and November of 1989, Betty Broderick left a series of voice messages on Daniel's answering machine that prosecutors would later play in court. The messages were raw. They were violent. They were the sound of a person who had passed beyond anger into something else entirely. Something cold. Something that had stopped caring about consequences. On October 28, 1989, 8 days before the end, Betty left a message that said, and I am paraphrasing from court transcripts, "You have pushed me to the end of my rope. This is going to end badly, and it is going to be your fault." Daniel Broderick heard that message. He did not call the police. He did not change his locks. He did not install an alarm. The front door of his house on Cypress Avenue remained unlocked. He had a restraining order. He believed that was enough. It was not enough. November 5th, 1989, a Sunday, 5:30 in the morning. San Diego was dark and silent. The neighborhood of Hillcrest was asleep. The Broderick house on Cypress Avenue sat at the end of a quiet street, lights off, curtains drawn. Daniel and Linda were in bed. They had been married for 6 months. Betty Broderick drove to the house. She had a key, an old one, from before the divorce. It did not matter. The front door was unlocked. She walked in. She moved through the dark house to the master bedroom. She opened the door. Daniel and Linda were asleep. Betty had brought a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver. She had purchased it weeks earlier. She raised the weapon and fired. 5 rounds. In a bedroom. In the dark. At 2 people in a bed. When the sound stopped, Daniel T. Broderick III was on the floor beside the bed. He had been hit twice, once in the chest, once in the back. He was not breathing. Linda Colkina Broderick was still in the bed. She had been hit once, in the chest. She reached for the telephone on the nightstand. Betty crossed the room, picked up the phone, and ripped it from the wall. Linda bled out. She was 28 years old. Daniel was 44. Betty Broderick walked out of the house. She got in her car. She drove to a payphone. She called her daughter Lee, who was 17 years old, and said, "I finally did it." Then she called her friend. Then she called her lawyer. Then she drove to the police station and turned herself in. She was covered in nothing. No blood. No visible distress. She walked into the station, sat down, and told the officers what she had done. Calmly, clearly, without tears. The city of San Diego woke up that morning to the news that one of its most prominent attorneys had been found dead in his bed alongside his new wife. The suspect was his ex-wife, a mother of 4, a woman with no criminal record prior to the divorce, a woman who, 5 years earlier, had been hosting dinner parties and driving her children to school and living what appeared to be a perfectly normal, perfectly suburban, perfectly American life. And that is when the question started. The question that would consume 2 trials, 9 years, and the attention of the entire country. And the question was not whether Betty Broderick did it. She confessed. There was no mystery. The question was, why? And more importantly, whose fault was it? Because here is where America split in half. On one side, the prosecutors. They said Betty Broderick was a vindictive, narcissistic woman who could not accept that her marriage was over. They said she had years to move on and chose not to. They said she made a deliberate, premeditated decision to enter that house with a loaded weapon and execute 2 sleeping people. They pointed to the voice messages, the threats, the car through the front door, the restraining order violations. They said, "This is not a victim. This is a predator." On the other side, a very different story. Betty's defense team and a growing chorus of women across the country said something else entirely. They said Betty Broderick was the product of a system that allowed a wealthy, powerful man to use the law as a weapon against a woman who had no resources, no connections, and no recourse. They said Daniel Broderick had gaslighted her for years. They said he stole her children, stole her money, stole her identity, and then married the woman he had been lying about in a ceremony that excluded his own kids. They said the court system was rigged in his favor. They said every institution she turned to, lawyers, judges, therapists, had been compromised by Daniel's influence. And they said that when every legal door is closed, when every appeal is denied, when every cry for help is recorded and used against you, the system does not leave you with many options. This is Miles GhostHunter speaking, and I want to be very clear about what I am doing right now. I am not telling you who is right. I am showing you the machine. I am showing you the gears and the levers and the pressure points, and I am asking you to look at the mechanism, because the mechanism is where the real horror lives. Let me show you the machine. California in the 1980s had a family court system that operated on the principle of judicial discretion. That means a single judge had enormous power over the outcome of a divorce, custody, support, division of assets. If that judge happened to know one of the parties personally, the system relied on self-recusal. The judge was supposed to voluntarily step aside. There was no independent mechanism to enforce this. Daniel Broderick was a member of the San Diego County Bar Association. He attended the same events as the judges who would hear his case. He had represented clients in the same courts for over a decade. His professional reputation was built on relationships with the very people who held power over his divorce proceedings. Betty's attorneys raised this issue. They filed motions. They requested new judges. The motions were denied. The reason given in court records was insufficient evidence of bias. The legal standard for proving judicial bias in California at that time required evidence of actual prejudice, not the appearance of prejudice. And since no judge was going to admit on record that his friendship with Daniel Broderick influenced his rulings, the standard was effectively impossible to meet. Here is what that meant in practice. It meant that when Betty Broderick left threatening voice messages on Daniel's machine, the court treated those messages as evidence of her instability. When Daniel Broderick systematically reduced her support payments, using legal maneuvers that only an experienced attorney would know, the court treated that as standard procedure. When Betty showed up at Daniel's house in violation of the restraining order, she was held in contempt. When Daniel used his access to their joint accounts to pay for Linda Kolkina's wardrobe, his vacations with Linda, his gifts to Linda, using money that Betty had helped earn during 16 years of marriage, the court called it a matter for the property settlement. The system was not broken. That is the part you need to understand. The system was working exactly as designed. It was designed to process disputes between two parties with roughly equal resources and roughly equal access to representation. When one party is a millionaire attorney with personal relationships throughout the judiciary, and the other party is a housewife with no income and no professional network, the system does not malfunction. It simply produces the expected result. Daniel Broderick knew this. He was a lawyer. He understood the system better than almost anyone in San Diego, and he used that understanding with surgical precision. Every time Betty acted out, and she did act out, repeatedly, dramatically, undeniably, Daniel documented it. He kept the voice messages, he photographed the damage, he filed the motions. He built a case not just for the divorce, but for the narrative. The narrative was, Betty is crazy, Betty is dangerous, Betty cannot be trusted with the children, Betty needs to be controlled. And the system agreed, because the system only saw the evidence, and Daniel was the one creating the evidence. I'm not excusing what Betty Broderick did. I want that to be absolutely clear. She walked into a bedroom, and she fired 5 rounds at 2 sleeping people. That is a fact. That is not in dispute. 2 people are gone. 2 human beings who had their own lives, their own plans, their own right to exist. But Miles' Ghost Hunter does not stop at the obvious. I go deeper. I ask the question that makes everyone uncomfortable. And the question is this: what happens to a human being when every single institutional safety net is removed? What happens when the courts, the lawyers, the therapists, the family, the friends, all of them either cannot help or will not help? What happens when the person who destroyed your life is also the person the system is designed to protect? What happens is November 5th, 1989. The first trial of Betty Broderick began on October 22nd, 1990, in San Diego's Superior Court. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Kerry Wells, presented the case as straightforward, premeditated homicide. The voice messages were played in open court. The jury heard Betty Broderick's voice, raw and profane and full of rage, threatening to end Daniel's life. They heard dozens of these messages. The prosecution argued that Betty had weeks to plan, that she purchased the weapon in advance, that she chose the early morning hour deliberately, that she knew the front door would be unlocked because she knew Daniel's habits. and that she walked into that bedroom with the specific intent to end 2 lives. The defense, led by attorney Jack Early, argued that Betty Broderick was a battered woman. Not physically battered, but psychologically, emotionally, and financially battered by a man who wielded the legal system like a club. Early argued that 16 years of devotion, followed by systematic destruction, had pushed Betty into a psychological state where she was no longer capable of premeditated thought. He argued she was acting in a dissociative state, that she did not go to that house to execute 2 people, that she went there to confront Daniel, that the weapon was for protection, that the shooting was impulsive, not planned. The jury deliberated for 4.5 days. They could not reach a verdict. The vote was split. Some wanted first-degree homicide, some wanted manslaughter, some wanted acquittal. The judge declared a mistrial. I want you to sit with that number, 4.5 days. 12 people locked in a room, looking at the same evidence, hearing the same testimony, and they could not agree, because the evidence pointed in 2 directions at once. The act was undeniable, the context was unbearable, and the law has no category for what Betty Broderick did. The second trial began in October of 1991. Same charges, same prosecution, new jury. This time the prosecution refined its strategy. They focused less on the voice messages and more on the physical evidence, the purchase of the weapon, the timing, the unlocked door, the route she drove. They built a timeline that demonstrated premeditation beyond reasonable doubt. The defense tried the same strategy: psychological abuse, systematic destruction, diminished capacity. But this time, the prosecution had a rebuttal witness who changed the temperature of the room. Daniel's friend, a man named Bradley Wright, testified that in the weeks before the incident, Betty had told him, calmly and specifically, that she intended to take Daniel's life. She described how. She described when. She described the weapon. The second jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty. 2 counts of second-degree homicide. Not first-degree. The jury apparently believed that the psychological abuse was a mitigating factor, even if it was not an excuse. But guilty. Betty Broderick was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. She applied for parole for the first time in 2010. Denied. She applied again in 2017. Denied. The parole board cited the same reason each time: insufficient remorse. Betty Broderick has never said she was sorry. She has said consistently, for over 3 decades, that Daniel Broderick drove her to it, that the system drove her to it, that she had no other option. The board does not accept that answer. The law does not accept that answer, and a significant portion of the American public does not accept that answer either. But here is what Miles GhostHunter accepts. The answer does not matter. What matters is the question. And the question is not whether Betty Broderick was justified. She was not. Nothing justifies walking into a bedroom and firing at sleeping people. The question is whether the system that was supposed to protect her, the courts, the lawyers, the judges, the support structures, whether that system functioned. And the answer, by every measurable standard, is no. The system did not protect Betty Broderick. The system was captured by the man she was trying to escape. Let me give you the numbers, because numbers do not lie, and numbers do not take sides. Daniel Broderick's annual income at the time of the divorce, over $1 million. Betty Broderick's court-ordered support at its lowest point, $1,500 per month. Daniel's legal expenses during the divorce, paid from community assets, over $100,000. Betty's ability to hire comparable counsel, non-existent. Daniel's social connections within the San Diego County Judiciary, documented. Betty's access to an impartial judge, requested and denied. Daniel's custody of all 4 children, granted on the basis of Betty's instability. Betty's instability, caused by the divorce proceedings that Daniel controlled. Do you see the circle? She was unstable because of the divorce. The divorce went against her because she was unstable. Her instability was evidence of her unfitness. Her unfitness justified taking her children. Taking her children made her more unstable. And around it went, year after year. Until there was nothing left of Betty Broderick except rage. And that is the machine. That is the system. Not a conspiracy, not a villain twirling his mustache. Just a set of rules that were never designed for a situation where one party holds all the power and the other holds none. A set of rules that a smart enough lawyer can turn into a weapon. And Daniel Broderick was smart enough. Now, let me tell you about the children, because everyone forgets the children. Kim Broderick was 19 years old when her mother killed her father. Lee was 17. Daniel IV was 13. Rhett was 10. These 4 human beings lost both parents in one night. Their father was dead. Their mother was in a cell. And the family that had once lived in a mansion in La Jolla was scattered like shrapnel. Kim, the eldest, sided with her father. She testified against Betty at both trials. She described her mother as volatile, unpredictable, and frightening. She said she had been afraid of Betty for years. She said Betty's obsession with Daniel had consumed everything, including her ability to be a mother. Lee, the second child, sided with Betty. She visited her mother in prison. She wrote letters. She gave interviews defending Betty's actions, not justifying the homicide but explaining the context. Lee said that Daniel had manipulated the children just as he had manipulated the courts. She said he had turned Kim against Betty deliberately, using the same gaslighting techniques he had used on his wife. Lee said she had seen both sides of the story, and the side that most people did not see was the side where Daniel Broderick was not a victim, but an architect. Daniel IV and Rhett were caught in the middle, too young to fully understand what had happened, old enough to carry the weight of it for the rest of their lives. I want to be direct with you about something. This is the part of the story that most true crime channels skip. They skip it because it is not dramatic, it is not cinematic. There is no gunshot, there is no courtroom revelation. There are just 4 kids growing up in the wreckage of 2 adults who could not stop destroying each other. And those 4 kids did not choose any of this. They did not choose their father's affair. They did not choose their mother's rage. They did not choose the divorce, the custody battles, the restraining orders, the voice messages, the car to the front door. They were passengers in a vehicle driven by 2 people who had forgotten they were in the back seat. Kim Broderick went on to become a successful professional. She has rarely spoken publicly about the case in recent years. Lee Broderick struggled. She had legal troubles of her own. She has spoken openly about the psychological damage the case inflicted on her. Daniel IV became a real estate professional. Rhett has stayed almost entirely out of the public eye. 4 children, 4 different outcomes, 1 shared wound that will never fully close. And here is the part where I bring this home. Because I promised you at the beginning that you would not be able to answer the question, and I meant it. Betty Broderick is not a hero. She is not a symbol. She is not a martyr. She walked into a bedroom and she fired at 2 people who were sleeping. Linda Kolkina was 28 years old. She had a family. She had a life. She did not deserve to die in her bed because a man she loved had treated his first wife badly. Daniel Broderick was 44. He was a flawed man, arrogant, manipulative, possibly cruel. But flawed men do not deserve to be shot in their sleep. There is no universe in which what Betty Broderick did was acceptable. None. And yet the system that was supposed to prevent this, the courts, the judges, the lawyers, the restraining orders, the custody arrangements, the support payments, that system did not prevent it. That system in many ways created the conditions for it. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but structurally. The way a river creates a canyon, not because it wants to, but because the rock has no choice. Betty Broderick asked for help. She asked the courts. She asked her lawyers. She asked her friends. She asked her family. And at every turn, the answer was the same. Daniel is too powerful. Daniel knows too many people. Daniel controls the money. There is nothing we can do. When every door is closed, some people sit down and accept it. Some people find a window, and some people find a gun. I am not excusing her. I am explaining the architecture, and the architecture has not changed. That is the final sickening fact of this entire story. California reformed some of its family court procedures in the decades after the Broderick case. Mandatory disclosure of judicial relationships was strengthened. Support calculation formulas were standardized. But the fundamental problem, the problem of asymmetric power in divorce proceedings, the problem of one party having vastly more resources and connections than the other, that problem remains. It remains in California. It remains in every state. It remains in every country where the legal system is built on the assumption that both parties enter the courtroom as equals. They do not. They never have. And until that changes, there will be more Betty Brodericks. Not all of them will pick up a gun. Most of them will simply disappear, ground down, impoverished, separated from their children, erased from the narrative of their own lives. You will never hear their names. You will never know their stories. They will simply vanish into the machinery. Betty Broderick did not vanish. She refused, and the way she refused was monstrous. But the machine that pushed her to that point, that machine is still running, right now. As you listen to this, somewhere in America, a woman is sitting in a courtroom, watching her ex-husband's lawyer shake hands with the judge, and she is realizing that the system is not broken. The system is working exactly as designed. And she is not part of the design. Betty Broderick is 77 years old. She is incarcerated at the California Institution for Women in Chino. She has been behind bars for over 35 years. She will be eligible for parole again in 2028. Based on past hearings, she will likely be denied, because she will not say she is sorry, because Betty Broderick believes to this day that she was pushed, and the parole board believes to this day that being pushed is not an excuse. They are both right, and that is the horror of this story. Not the gunshots, not the blood, not the bodies in the bed. The horror is that everyone is right, and 2 people are still dead, and 4 children are still broken, and the machine is still running, and nobody has figured out how to stop it. This is Miles' Ghost Hunter, and if you think this story made you uncomfortable, wait until you hear what I have for you next time. Episode 19, A Killer Who Did Not Do It for Love. Did not do it for money, did not do it for revenge, did it because it was fun. And the system did not just fail to stop him, the system handed him the tools. I will see you there.